Welcome to What If Lab. What if wealth in the world were distributed equally? What if all humans had the same amount of wealth? The craziest experiment on Earth begins. A global government initiative launches a policy called the Wealth Reset Plan, where all human wealth is reset and redistributed. Every individual receives equal resources and assets. What would such a world look like? Has humanity finally achieved the ideal of equality? Or have we opened the door to disaster? When everyone has the same wealth, the first question arises: who will still take on the hard and dangerous jobs? This is not hard to understand. Over 2,000 years ago, the Greek playwright Aristophanes raised a similar question in his comedy, Wealth. If no one fears poverty, who will become a blacksmith, farmer, or construction worker? This is the problem of economic incentives. Modern economic theories also suggest that excessive equality weakens human motivation, especially when the wealth gained from working hard and not working is the same. This has not only been imagined but has actually happened in history. This is why the Soviet planned economy experienced the common pot effect. When no one is rewarded extra for hard work, work motivation rapidly collapses. If global wealth were evenly distributed at one point, within a year, a new wealth gap would reappear. This is because human behavior will never be the same. This phenomenon is known as the wealth redistribution paradox. Even with the same starting point, different choices quickly lead to new disparities. No matter how hard we try to make wealth equal, as long as human choices are different, inequality will reappear. To solve this problem and maintain this perfect equality, the only choice is continuous wealth monitoring and redistribution. The government must establish a wealth distribution monitoring system, where any assets exceeding the average are confiscated and redistributed to everyone. This is an endless process, but here's the issue. When we force equality, doesn't this system itself create a new form of inequality? Does the government or institution in charge of monitoring power become the new class? From a social and cultural perspective, wealth equality may bring unexpected benefits. The most obvious of these is the reduction in crime. In this equal world, poverty-induced crime almost disappears. Research shows that when the wealth gap is too large, crime rates tend to be higher. Poverty and despair drive people to take risks, attempting to gain resources through illegal means. This has been somewhat demonstrated in Nordic countries, although their wealth is not perfectly equal. Through high taxes and comprehensive welfare systems, the wealth gap is compressed into a smaller range. The result: countries like Sweden, Denmark, and Finland have crime rates, unemployment rates, and social unrest rates that are far below the global average. But will such equality make everyone happy? In this world, although wealth is the same, people begin to notice new differences. To achieve and maintain wealth equality, an almost omnipotent government or system is required. Whenever inequality resurfaces, the government must intervene immediately to redistribute and monitor. What does this mean? It means extreme central management power and an almost omnipresent surveillance system. When we try to achieve complete wealth equality, we must rely on a strong central control system. The problems brought by such a surveillance system are evident. Past communist countries like the Soviet Union and Cambodia's Khmer Rouge tried to achieve equality through total asset control. Such systems inevitably result in concentrated power and excessive surveillance. The Soviet 5-year plans and China's People's Commune system both tried to eliminate the wealth gap through forced equality. But what were the results? Resource shortages, economic collapse, loss of innovation, widespread human rights oppression, political purges, and new inequalities emerging due to concentrated power. Can such a society sustain itself? Will the economic inefficiency risk become the reason for the collapse of this world? Let's move to a fictional future, the year 2100. After a global economic reform, humanity has finally implemented the Wealth Zero redistribution plan, where everyone has equal wealth. The operation of this new world relies on a vast network called the Global Wealth Distribution Monitoring System, and salaries are evenly distributed among all adult citizens. In this new world, everyone receives a standard allocation or basic income annually, which is the only source of wealth. Currency still exists, but it only serves as an accounting unit. Every individual's account is monitored in real time to prevent the accumulation of excessive wealth. This is a world without poverty. No matter where you live or what job you do, everyone's purchasing power is the same, whether it's education, healthcare, or basic living resources. Everything is provided for free by the government. When everyone receives the same income, the trickiest problem arises: who will still be willing to do those heavy, dangerous, or boring jobs? In this equal society, the government is forced to implement a system called mandatory labor. Every citizen must participate in a certain number of hours of socially necessary work each year to ensure basic production and services run smoothly. But the problem is, even with mandatory labor, people's motivation remains low, because no matter the work results, the income will always be the same basic income. In this equal society, innovation becomes difficult, because the innovation award system is seen as unfair. The profits from all products and services are averaged by the system, meaning that even if someone creates new technology or artwork, they cannot receive higher returns. This leads to what is known as the innovation crisis. When money can no longer serve as motivation, people must look for other reward mechanisms such as reputation, social recognition, or even moral responsibility. But for entrepreneurs seeking profit, such incentives are not enough to sustain long-term innovation development. When everyone's income is equal, the truly scarce resources become power, influence, and the underground economy. The operation of this underground economy is similar to the black market in reality, but more complex. The most common goods traded in the black market are knowledge, technology, and influence. In this equal world, these things are rarer and more valuable than money. Now, let's hear from the true experts and historical case studies. What do they say about this topic? Supporters of UBI argue that wealth equality does not necessarily have to come through forced wealth zeroing. As long as everyone has basic economic security, a more equal society can be created. This is the idea behind Universal Basic Income UBI. Finland conducted a famous UBI experiment between 2017 and 2018. They randomly selected 2,000 unemployed individuals and provided them with €560 per month unconditionally. The key point is, the money was given unconditionally. They could save it, invest it, use it for food, or waste it on strange hobbies. It was entirely up to their choice. The results showed that these people had significantly higher mental health and life satisfaction. The basic income group was more satisfied with life, had lower mental stress, and was more optimistic about their financial situation. The researchers concluded, this suggests that moderate wealth security, even without complete equality, can improve individual well-being without necessarily making people completely lazy. UBI supporters such as Silicon Valley entrepreneurs or some economists argue that in the era of automation, UBI can help narrow the wealth gap and maintain social stability. However, opponents worrying about the financial sustainability of UBI in the long term, as well as its impact on labor supply after large-scale implementation. Overall, the UBI experiment provides us with a snapshot. When people are freed from survival anxiety, happiness rises and no large-scale laziness has occurred, offering some positive signals for a wealth-equal society. But this experiment also shows work willingness has not significantly increased. Many economists worrying that when people can live without working, It may lead to stagnation in economic growth, a shrinking labor force, and financial bankruptcy in the long run. This is the most controversial point of UBI. Supporters believe it can eliminate poverty, improve well-being, and promote creativity and personal development. Opponents fear it will lead to economic stagnation and a lazy culture. This also makes us think, if the world truly achieved complete wealth equality, would it lead to the same problems? Would people still be motivated to work hard without economic pressure? If UBI is a peaceful equality experiment, then the economic systems of the Soviet Union and China were extreme forced experiments. These countries attempted to establish what they called a proletarian paradise, where all resources were owned by the state and equally distributed. Now, let's take a look at another, completely different experiment: the Soviet Union's planned economy. This was a real-life national wealth equality experiment. The Soviet government tried to build a proletarian paradise, where all wealth and resources were owned by the state and distributed equally to everyone, aiming to eliminate wealth differences. The former Soviet Union adopted a planned economy, attempting to eliminate the exploiting class and achieve highly equal wealth. In the early stages, the wealth gap indeed shrank to a very low level, with the government guaranteeing everyone's basic needs through a rationing system. However, this was followed by economic inefficiency and stagnation in innovation, since people could not improve their personal economic situation through effort. Labor enthusiasm dropped, and the phenomenon of pretending to work emerged. While the Soviet Union achieved successes in the military and aerospace fields, its civil economy was poor, and by the 1980s it was stagnating, ultimately leading to the collapse of the system. China also followed an egalitarian route in the decades after its founding, such as during the People's Commune system, where farmers' incomes were evenly distributed per head. However, the economic lesson learned was that the common pot easily fostered laziness, and the lack of reward mechanisms led to low production efficiency. Before the reform and opening up, Chinese society was relatively equal but generally poor. After 1978, China implemented market reforms, allowing some people to become rich first, and the economy grew rapidly, but this also widened the wealth gap. When this system tells you, no matter how hard you work, you get the same reward, would you still be willing to work hard? When everyone receives the same reward, work motivation disappears. The result: low factory efficiency, stagnation in innovation, and shortages of goods. Ultimately, this experiment ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. This is the most disastrous outcome when wealth equality is built on the deprivation of innovation and personal freedom. Modern Nordic countries are not communist but have achieved a relatively equal society through high taxes and comprehensive welfare systems, which are seen as examples of achieving both equality and prosperity. The income Gini coefficient in Nordic countries is around 0.25, which falls into the relatively equal category. Sweden, Denmark, and Finland have compressed the wealth gap into a relatively small range through high taxes and a well-established social welfare system. This is not absolute equality, but at least most people live with dignity. These countries use progressive taxation to transfer a portion of the wealth of high-income earners into public resources, which are used for universal education, health care, and pensions, thus narrowing the wealth gap. At the same time, Nordic countries retain the competitive vitality of the market economy, allowing businesses to develop and individuals to become wealthy, but through the social security system to rebalance the results. The result: enhanced social fairness and security, high trust in the government and each other, and consistently high happiness indices. More importantly, these countries retain the flexibility of the market economy, allowing businesses to develop and individuals to become wealthy, but through the tax system to regulate the balance. This society, with a small wealth gap but still retaining innovation and economic freedom, is known as welfare capitalism. The result: their happiness index has consistently ranked at the top globally. However, the Nordic model also faces challenges and criticism. Some argue that too much equality may lead to a decline in productivity and slower economic growth. In fact, Nordic countries' GDP per capita and innovation capabilities are still impressive, but the government needs to balance encouraging entrepreneurship and ensuring social welfare. Many thinkers have different views on wealth equality and inequality. Some economists argue that there is a just right level of inequality that maximizes economic growth. For example, Martin Moryson, chief economist at Germany's DWS, suggested that a completely equal society would struggle to grow due to a lack of work incentives, while extreme inequality would also demotivate the majority. Both extremes would lead to economic stagnation, so there should be an optimal level of inequality. He estimates a Gini coefficient of about 0.30. This means that moderate inequality might be more beneficial to society, and complete equality might not be the best solution. Philosopher John Rawls proposed his famous difference principle from a justice perspective: only social and economic inequalities that benefit the least advantaged can be allowed. In other words, it does not require everyone to be equal in outcome, but it requires that any disparity makes the worst off better off than in a perfectly equal society. This view does not advocate absolute equality, but emphasizes care for the disadvantaged and fair opportunities in the public policy domain. Some research and international organizations such as IMF economists have found that reducing inequality through wealth redistribution does not necessarily harm economic performance and might even promote more sustainable growth. For example, improving educational opportunities for the poor and enhancing social mobility can raise overall productivity, which in the long run benefits the economy. Furthermore, some look to futuristic sci-fi scenarios, such as AI and automation bringing about a post-scarcity era, where material abundance makes wealth equality a natural result. In fictional worlds like Star Trek, Federation members no longer use money, and everyone's desires are met by technology, a utopian equality achieved through technology. But before we reach that level of productivity, the above real-world cases and theoretical perspectives remind us wealth equality has pros and cons. We need to strike a balance between fairness and efficiency, and perhaps complete wealth equality is not the ultimate solution. The more realistic path is to pursue a hybrid system of guaranteed basic equality plus moderate incentives, continuously seeking a dynamic balance between equality and efficiency. Human society will continue to explore this path, finding answers that belong to our era from past lessons and future innovations. The scenario of all humans having equal wealth is a double-edged sword, containing both a beautiful vision of eliminating poverty and achieving justice in human society and deep concerns about economic stagnation and reduced innovation. Economically, absolute equality may weaken incentives, leading to a decline in productivity and creativity, while moderate inequality may actually contribute to prosperity. But at the same time, excessive inequality brings social problems, so finding the right balance is crucial. Socially and culturally, wealth equality is expected to reduce crime, enhance overall well-being, and foster a sense of unity. But we must also guard against the human tendency to seek advantage, which may manifest in other forms. Politically, establishing such a system poses tremendous challenges, requiring strong and fair governance. Historical experience shows that even small missteps can cause the system to deviate from its original intent. Perhaps the ideal future is not absolute wealth distribution, but a system that ensures everyone can live with dignity, while allowing for some degree of diversity and competition, so that society has both a fair baseline and the motivation to develop. The ultimate goal of wealth equality is to ensure that everyone can live with dignity, with no one falling into despair due to poverty. To achieve this, identical wealth may not be a necessary condition. A more realistic path is to regulate wealth disparity through policies, drawing on the strengths of various models, and achieving a dynamic balance between equality and efficiency. Human society will continue to explore this path, learning from past lessons and future innovations to find the answers for our time. Thank you for joining us in this what-if journey. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. See you next time.